Okay, so that was an original Joplin roll. And I thought it would be nice to start off with some music because I'm going to be doing a lot of talking now. All right, so you've got the title of my presentation. And I have to start off with this basic concept that the player piano itself from 1900 to 1920 was a direct product of the capitalist system. You know, this system, aided and abetted by technological innovation, centered around manufacture and sales of an unprecedented array of material products that featured time-saving convenience, ease of use, and a tangible means for defining economic and social standings. Before 1900, the piano was already established as a central feature of Western music. But when the player piano came about, it was hailed as a miracle because, in a nutshell, a player piano could flawlessly execute complex musical scores that would have taken a human performer years of toiling to acquire enough skill to play by hand. Initial concern that the player piano would replace the hands-on human touch of playing the piano with 10 fingers was quickly swept away. The player piano had many advantages apart from the ease of use and flawless replication of piano music scores. Additional notes beyond what 10 fingers could play could be added in the editing process. The ability for the machine to play more notes than could a human opened the door to suggesting the enriched sonority of a symphony or a dance band, you know, symphonic ensemble. The benefit was that people could hear in their own homes music they would previously only have been able to hear in a larger performance venue such as a concert hall or a dance hall. Enriching an existing score with added notes or overlaying an actual human performance captured via piano roll recording offered the possibility of new musical creations without precedent. We'll hear some of those today. Finally, the player piano was a corporate dream. The machine and its musical product, music encoded into paper rolls, could be developed and manufactured at a speed and scale previously unknown and in a dazzling spectrum of styles. When the player piano entered into the marketplace in the late 19th century, the mechanism for playing paper piano rolls went in basically two different directions. And now, one was a large keyless machine equipped with strings and a soundboard. And here's a picture. Oh, come on. All right, there it goes. Okay, this is what I'm talking about. This keyless piano roll playing mechanism. It has strings and a soundboard. Very expensive. This is a Welty Mignon, and it came from the Morris Museum in New Jersey. Fantastic collection of automatic instruments and player pianos. The other, which became far more prevalent, was a bulky, coffin-shaped machine that could be rolled up to any existing piano. It had wood and metal fingers that could be positioned over the keys. In theory, the machine, called a piano player, or Vorsätzer, that could mate to an existing piano was a nice idea. You could buy it and use it with a piano you already owned. But the device wasn't exactly easy to use. It was heavy and large, as you will see, and required precise positioning over the keys in order to play properly. Moreover, it had to be moved away when the piano was actually being used by a human performer. This machine, called a piano player, a Vorsätzer, or now, as is more common, a push-up, because you push it up to the piano, was what I used for my Gershwin CD recordings during the 1990s. It was made into a modern disc clavier, which is by Yamaha, to play back the Gershwin rolls, which were subsequently recorded from a disclavier in a recording hall. So mine was a late model of this, 1918 Aeolian metric-style Pianist push-up. The disclavier was hailed as the modern equivalent to the player piano because it had that added ability to actually record as well as playback. Now here's, hopefully we'll see what it is. I have a little video showing this machine.
Since December, it jumps to the #1 slot on the classical chart in the next issue of Billboard. Imagine that, George Gershwin back on top of the charts. Mark Shearer, CNN Entertainment News, New York.
Around 1900, player piano companies found ways to miniaturize the playback components of the bulky piano playing Vorzitzer so they could be fitted into a normal piano case like this one. This is the form you see here, and it's the one most associated with the idea of the player piano. Miniaturizing the playback mechanism and inserting it into a piano's normal case increased functionality and convenience all around. It was space-saving, looked good, and there was no need to move anything in order for the piano to be played by hand. Above all, from a corporate standpoint, the interplayer player piano was a way to generate even more sales. By 1919, over half of the new pianos sold were player pianos. The earliest piano rolls were created by roll editors referencing printed music scores. They simply cut into the paper roll perforations that corresponded to the pitches and relative durations as notated in the score. The rolls created this way were therefore merely a presentation of flat, uninflected data. But there was never any doubt that the minute inflections of note timing and dynamic shifts, characteristic of human performance, continued to be very important to listeners of the early 20th century. In fact, it's precisely the mechanical nature of the early player piano that fueled these initial fears of the player piano's non-human, unfeeling presentation of music that might supplant human performance. We're seeing this with AI now, right? In order to meet consumer demand for human-like piano roll playback, the companies installed devices into their player pianos, levers, buttons, or knobs that could be manipulated in real time by the person foot pumping through the roll, which you may have noticed I was trying to do over here. Okay. Indeed, skilled foot pumping controlling airflow and therefore hammer speed to the strings and even the roll speed itself could be used to affect dynamic and tempo variation. That means loud and soft and fast and slow. So, very early, instructional manuals, books, and essays popped up explaining how the person pumping through the roll, who came to be commonly referred to as the pianolist, could achieve musical expression with a player piano. Starting early and going well into the 1920s, the companies realized that they could ink into the rolls as well, print information to address this need for expression. They inscribed interpretive directions for the pianolist to see as they pumped. These markings indicated plausible, dynamic shading and tempo modification. One sees wavy lines or dotted lines of varying colors, usually blue or red, printed on rolls to provide this guidance. And here's an example. Okay, you see the blue line over there. They called that the expression line, and that was for the pianolist to go loud or soft. Further left is further left is soft, further right is loud. They even put a P over here, piano, to make sure you knew that. And then over here, now this is really tricky. over here you have the tempo changes. You know, you've heard of tempo rubato where it shifts the tempo, they give expression. Well, see, left is slower and then right gets faster. It's very minute in this really tiny space. You have to get slower and you can do that with your foot pumping, there are many ways to do it, but you can do it with the player piano. These lines were added as a helpful guide, not a rigid instruction. In fact, the companies and the music critics encouraged the amateur pianolist, or literally anyone at all, sales, to use their own imagination to add expression into their own performances. The practice of printing interpretive guides on the rolls was surprisingly widespread and extended to both classical and popular compositions. So, you know, they felt there was a need for this. So, okay, not content to leave roll technology at this stage of development and sensing an opening for expanded sales. Beginning around 1904, various player piano companies and roll companies, the two that really come to mind are Welty and Aeolian, big-time companies, began a fierce competition. Each sought methods for recording the unique performance of accomplished pianists that could be cut into piano rolls. No longer the score, but actually a real person playing. Okay. Recording devices were invented or purported to have been invented to capture in real time an artist's note timing and dynamic inflections as they played on a moving template. Okay. Once a company could claim and advertise this technological feat, they could then market a whole new group of piano rolls as played by a name brand performer. For sales purposes, many rolls were marketed as playback, however, that in fact were not, such as Joplin's Something Doing, which you just heard. That was it was just taken out of the score. But it says on the box, played by. In order to recreate the particularized performance derived from a specific artist, the pianolist, the person pumping, had to execute the instructions for dynamic and temporal inflection that had been printed on the roll, because they were ostensibly at the, this is what the artist wanted. But the play-by rolls, in a sense, unfortunately, limited the freedom of pianists, the person pumping roll, to add in their own ideas, and the only way to get the roll performance right was to follow these instructions. Furthermore, now coming back to making more sales, more stuff. Additional new devices that could execute a more fine-grained, expressive rendition began to be added to the simpler player piano, such as this one. This is a very simple player piano. It's what most people actually had. In turn, to execute these enhancements, a new breed of piano rolls needed to be created that could execute these refinements. Most notable was the addition of the theming capability. Now, here's what it looks like. Okay. Is that it? Yes. Okay. Small sets of perforations on the far left and the far right of the roll triggered the playback mechanism to bring out, that is to say, play certain notes louder than pitches around them. Now, bringing out a melody, if you study piano, is a standard performance practice that is required to learn if you want to proceed as a reasonable pianist. You have to know how to balance your chords and bring out melodies and inner notes and all this. Everybody did that, and they still do, of course. Okay. The introduction of this standard expressive capability also served as a new selling point, of course, because both for the most complex player piano that could execute theming and companionate piano rolls. So, in other words, it's a way to create more sales. Of course, they're meeting some kind of demand for expression, but ultimately it's a commercial product. The downside is that the pianist's role in the performance became increasingly circumscribed. In other words, the pianolist as the center. This pianolist was not the creator of the performance. They ended up being the kind of the executant following instructions. You know, there's a progression here that we all know about. Okay. High-end name brand artists, both in popular and classical, recording them and putting out rolls that replicated at least some of their characteristic expressive approaches eventually culminated in the reproducing player piano. Now, that's not this instrument. These final stage piano roll playing machines, they are acoustic pianos, yes, but they were fitted with mechanically complex components and were dauntingly expensive. They cost as much as a small house. They were designed to automatically execute all parameters of expressive performance via extra perforations that were punched into more data-rich and costly reproducing piano rolls. And here you'll see one of them. Look at this. Look at all that stuff. I mean, it's, yeah, all right. So, in this end stage development, foot pumping was no longer required. The owner of the reproducing piano, most of which by the time reproducing pianos achieved maximum production, were electrified. There was a transitional period, I won't go into it. All the owner had to do was turn on the switch and off when it was over. As the 1920s wore on, radio and the increased sonic realism of Electric 78 recordings, music devices of greater convenience and lower price spelled doom for the player piano. By the mid-1920s, sales of player pianos and piano rolls were already declining. Finally, the Depression came along and finished off a behemoth industry which had grown by leaps and bounds for a little more than 2 decades. So, okay, so now you know all about it. Now let's go on and hear some music.